everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jennifer, and today we're going to take a look at the Dior Holiday Ecrin palette. I'm going to show you this one. We're going to go through the details and compare it to last year's edition, which looks like this. So I'm going to actually do side by side, this on one side of my face, this on the other. So if you're interested in seeing that, just stay tuned. Hey everybody, so I'm going to pull my hair back. I do have foundation on, my brows are done, and I have a little bit of bronzer because neither one of these palettes has a bronzer in them. Now, let me just show you the details on the outside first. We'll talk about that. So this Ecrin palette, this is this year's, is done completely in velvet. Velvet on the front, a velvet on the back, and then there's a sticker back here that talks about the ingredients that are inside. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's this gold bar that pulls down and then closes it like that. So that's how it stays closed, which I do really like because, you know, there's cream products in here for the lip and there's powder products in here. So I like the fact that the bar, if you will, just keeps it closed like that. It is a beautiful representation. I think Dior did a really nice job with it. Last year's is very similar, but of course has a different motif. So you have, I think this is the 34 Montaigne in Boulevard, it's Rue de Montaigne. I forgot how to say it in French. But anyway, I think that's the building in Paris. And it's a faux leather with the embossing on the front. And then on the back, you've just got the faux leather. You've got the sticker with the details. And then you do have the gold bar, but there's just, it's a plain gold bar. And it does the exact same thing. Folds down, folds up to keep it tight. Now, on the back, the stickers, they're very, very tiny. Let's see what this says. I'll make sure it's all in the details, guys, because it's like impossible to read. But hopefully coming up right now is what's in the old one and what's in the new one. Hopefully that's like, yeah. So they do look like they're different shades though, even though they're very, very similar. They do look like they're different shades. All right. And with the blushes, you can see that. With the lipsticks, not as much, but with the blushes, you can see it. And the powder, you can actually see there's a difference in the powder too. So let me hold them up, fold them back so you can see them in their glory. Those are the two. The top is the new one. The bottom is the old one. So let's start with the blushes and let's do swatches. So this is the new one. I think this is $9.99. Pretty sure that's what it said on the back, but. And this was Ball, which I think is like $2.50 or something. I'll make sure the right things are up, but that's the new blushes. And then in the old one, it's a much pinkier. I mean, they're both pink, but the new one has like more almost red peach. And the last year's is like much more just pink. So here's New Year. This is the new 2022, and here's 2021. Yeah, last year's is more pink because this $9.99, it's pretty red, but it's not too pigmented, so I think I'll be able to work with it, but we'll find out. All right, and let's use the powder. This is the new powder. It's very opalescent pink. That's actually really pretty. And then last year's is definitely warmer. Yep. Last year's is like more like a peach. This year is much more like a pink, like an opalescent pink. They're actually both very nice. Let's do the lips, and then the eyeshadow I'll wipe off my arm and we'll start again for that. Okay, so this is the new. And again, I will have the shades somewhere. I'll make sure they're on the screen. I think that's the metallic. Yeah, that's the metallic. That looks like Shuri. Those are the new 4 shades. And like I said, I'll make sure all the names are correct when I edit. So these are the new 4 shades, and these are the 2 new blushes, and there's the new highlighter, or illuminating powder, depending on how you want to call it. All right, so here's last year's. Lipsticks still feel fine, actually. There's nothing on them. I do keep my makeup away from any humidity, away from light. So, I mean, I'm very careful about how I store these things, but careful, you know, cream products don't last that long. So I wouldn't be surprised if these were problematic, but they're not. And they don't have any smell or anything either, which is interesting. So last year's is much more pink leaning for the entire thing. This year, you know, these have a little bit of warmth, like this one and this one definitely. These were definitely pinker, but I think this year's compared to last year's, I like the shades better this year. Same with the blush and same with the highlighting, the illuminating powder actually. I like the pinkish shade more than the peach. Again, this is this year, last year. Okay, let me clean my arm off and we'll try out the eyeshadows. And I will be putting these on my face, so even though we're swatching on my arm, we'll do the face as well. All right, let's swatch. All right, let's do this year's. Oh, that's really pretty. This first shade it's got some pink to it, but it has almost like, think of the name of that shade. My art days weren't so far behind me. Can't think of the name of it, but it's like got a little pink and a little brown in it. And this is a purple, believe it or not. It's a very deep purpley brown. It's actually really nice. Okay. Oh, that's beautiful. And then the shade in the middle is usually like a satin. Yeah, that's really nice. It does not look like it does in the pan at all. All right, let's do last year's. Last year's feels a little drier, but you know, again, that could be because it's a year old. I mean, don't want to be unfair to it. This brown feels the same, which is interesting. It's definitely a matte. I don't see a matte in this new one. They seem more satiny. I mean, this could be a matte, but if it's a matte, it's a really creamy one. All right, so these two shades are similar, if not the same, but the rest are different so far. And the middle shade in this one, last year's, is more like a topper. Okay, similar color stories, which is not a surprise because they do look similar in the pan. But this first shade, this is much lighter and less pink than this. This second shade, that's very similar, but this one is more pink. The third shade, it has purple to it. I know you can't really tell. It looks brown, I think, on the camera, but there's a purpleness to this. And this one is just straight cool brown, and it's a matte. This shade is very similar, but this one has a little bit more warmth. And this last shade, this gold shade, here it's much more sparkly as a topper. This is definitely a satin. So you're gonna get a similar look, but not exactly the same. Okay, so let's put it on the face. We'll start with the blush. We're gonna do the deeper blush and then the lighter blush on top, just to kind of give you a, you know, difference of the two of them. Actually, let's do the lighter blush. Let's do the lighter blush first so you can see that. Why is my brain not working today? Why is my brain never working lately? It's like, I think I got too much sleep. Okay, let's do a cheek highlight kind of thing here. Yeah, let's use these two. Trying to just decide on brushes. Okay, so let's go with the lighter blush first. So this is last year's, and this is a KZ02 brush, and this should be, you know, a pretty diffused look. It should not deposit a ton of shade, and I'm doing that on purpose, but you can still see it because I am so pale. So yeah, so that's the lighter blush from last year's palette. And again, I'll make sure all the shade names, whatever I can find. I think it's on the back of each one, but I can read last year's, but I can't read this year's. Like the light up here is pretty good, but it's not good enough. So I think I need like a magnifying glass. All right, then this side. This is this year's. This year's has more luminescence. Last year's, a little more matte, but they're both, I think they're probably both satins. They're similar. The light shades are similar. Last year's, this year's. Okay, now I'm gonna take the deeper shade. Last year's is definitely gonna be pinkier. You could see it on my arm. Yeah, it's much more pink. Very pink. And this year's should have more of like a reddish tone. I'm pretty sure this is 999, but I don't want to say that definitely because it really, if I showed you, I'll show you the back of the packaging, you'll see what I'm talking about. Like, it's impossible to read. I have 20/20 vision still, and I can't read it. So I think I'm gonna need direct light and a magnifying glass. Yeah, it's definitely redder. Pink, red. Both, you know, definitely pinky shades, but those are the two blushes. And I'll show you the back of this packaging so you can tell that I'm not just making things up. That is the words. Yeah, I can't read it either. So anyway, I'll make sure all the details, hopefully it's already been done, like there's details down below. So this year's is a redder, more, a deeper blush, and I think would probably work on more skin tones than last year's. Last year's is so pink that I actually think it's relatively pigmented, and I use these brushes, the KZ brushes, for that reason, because they're actually pretty pigmented. Dior blushes generally are, but it's so pink that there's gonna be people who don't like it because it's just pink. The red has some warmth to it, so if you have a deeper skin tone and you don't like pink, I think this year is just gonna be more flattering. It's really interesting. I kind of like the red better, to be honest with you. I like a red blush, it's just that I'm usually too pale to wear a red blush, but I think that actually looks nice. All right, let's use the highlighters in each. I'm also gonna use the highlighters the illuminating powder in the last step, but we'll use it as highlighter here too. We'll go in with last year's first. Definitely has a warmer cast to it. And then we'll do this year's, which I think you'll be able to see has more of that pink, opalescent. I don't think the sides look drastically different, but I can see a difference, which is nice because I'll be honest, guys, when I first opened this palette to look at the two of them, I was like, it looks exactly the same. And that worried me. All right, so we're gonna pull out the Sonia G Fusion set. One, because I just got them a little while ago and I haven't been able to play around with them that much. And two, these are really good brushes for pretty much any powder, cream, liquid. They're a great set. Like I said, I've only played with them for a little bit, but I like her when she does these fusion brushes, which are part synthetic, part natural. The combination makes for a very soft, very pliable, but very effective brush. So it picks up a lot of pigment, but not too much pigment. Some things like my orange, my vermilion brushes that you guys have noticed, these are great. This one in particular and another one that I have for picking up pigment when there isn't any. But if you try to use these in some of like the Dior palettes, it's too much pigment actually, which is I know weird. But so, you know, brushes like these are good for all around use, which I greatly appreciate. So the way we're gonna do this is I'm gonna do the same look with each palette. So in other words, I'm gonna start with the second to deepest shade. I'm gonna go to the deeper shade. I'm gonna use the deepest shade on the outer corner, lightest on the, you know, the whole thing, so that we get a similar look with these two. That is the purpose of this. So we'll see how that goes. So first I'm gonna start with the second to, well, on the outer edges in the triangles, it's the second to lightest. We won't count the one in the middle. That's gonna go on the eye. So the way that Dior curates their palettes, the quints, is the shade in the middle is the shade that's supposed to go as like the tie-in for all the shades. So you could use the 3 on the right, the 3 on the left, the 3 on the top, the 3 on the bottom, and the shade in the middle is the one that ties the look together. So you can use that with all of the other shades. And of course, all the shades should work, you know, well together as a whole, but that middle shade is kind of the one that ties the look together. And I found that in all of the Dior palettes I've had, that's always been the case. All right, so that's last year's. This year's shade has more of a pink to it, as I was saying. It's satiny too, it's really pretty, but I'm trying to think of this. There's a name for the shade. of course, but I mean, in art, there's a name for the shade. I've used it, and of course, I cannot think of what it is. So any of you painters out there who know what I'm trying to think of, help me out. Yeah, I used to love to paint watercolors more than oil. If you've ever painted with oil, the stuff never dries, and the smell used to get to me, frankly. It's hard to have allergies and paint with oils, but anyway, yeah, there was a time that I really loved painting, and I have not gotten back to that, unfortunately. So yeah, so this has a much pinker look to it. This one, more neutral. This is a little bit cooler. They're both cool, but this has a little bit more brown. This has a little bit more pink. All right, so now we're gonna go, and I can actually show you while I do this. So we used this shade. We're gonna go to this shade. This is gonna be in the outer corner. That's gonna be on the eye. That's gonna be in the brow. And the same will be true for the other side. So we're gonna go to the second deepest shade, and we're just gonna emphasize the outer corner a little bit, just kind of like press right here. And I will be doing more tutorials that are by themselves because a lot of you want shorter videos, but you also want the tutorials. So I'm gonna try to separate them a little bit. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully, by the time this one goes up, I'm not sure, but my Cosmic Eyes one might be up, which is just a tutorial for that particular palette. And then when I get through holiday, I'll have more time to really focus on things. So we're gonna take this, the same thing, this is the new one, and we just basically emphasize the outer corner of the eye, brought it in just a little bit, and then with nothing on the brush, and I am wiping off the brush in between, even if you don't see that because I've cut it out, but so that we're not overlapping shades. But I think you can see the two look pretty similar. Not exactly the same, but it's close. It's really close. And I thought that would be the case because the undertones are different, but they're not so different that when you put them on the eye, you're gonna have a completely different look. Which again, is not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something to be aware of. All right, so now we're gonna take the lightest shade, put that in the brow area, and you could use this lightest shade for, you can use it anywhere you would like, but if you're looking at, for like a lightening shade, you know, something that's gonna accentuate your brow, or if you want to put it in the inner corner, which I probably will do at the end, or if you wanted to put it all over the lid, you know, whatever. You could use it in the crease if you wanted to. Again, it's, you know, it's makeup. There really isn't a right and wrong way. Just be aware of what the shades do. A light shade like this sort of brings it out. A dark shade makes it recede. Again, I'm just going into the lightest shade in the new palette, doing the same thing as the old. So you have a very, like I said, again, very similar look on the two lids. This is a little bit deeper and a little bit cooler, but it's not drastic. All right. Now we will take the light shade in the middle, which is on this side more of a topper, and on this side it's more of a satin. So we're gonna get a different look here. But you can see that the brushes are picking up the pigment really well. Even though this has a little bit more of a topper type formula to it, it's going down on the eye almost like a satin because I think the brushes are so good at picking up the pigment. So this one looks a little more opaque and a little more gold-like. I think you'll see that when we put it down on the eye. Can you see how this looks a little bit more intense? Not a lot, but a little bit. Whereas this side looks a little less opaque on the eye. All right, now I'll take the deepest shade and we're gonna go in with that with the smallest brush. This is the detail brush in the new collection from Sonia G. We're gonna take the deepest shade. On this side, it's a matte. This is last year's. And I'm just gonna kind of run it on this outer corner here and the outer corner lower lash line. So I'm not gonna line the eye. I'm just gonna literally make a V. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Make sure my brush is clean so we know. Yeah, they're very similar looks. I think if you played up this purple shade in here, because it's got that more of that cool tone to it, I think you might make the look cooler than this one because this is more of a matte brown and this has this purple to it, but I don't think it's gonna make a huge difference. Yeah, they're very similar. This has more opacity because the gold that I have on my lid is more intense, and this one, like I said, is more a topper. but I think they're both very pretty. Okay, let me put on some mascara and then we will move to lips. Okay, so we've got mascara on, and I have to say, guys, looking in the mirror, they look eerily similar. I think the difference is this one is almost lighter because the shade in the middle shade that I used is more like a topper, so it has more of that, you can see through it a little bit more, where this one is more opaque. But the shades in general are very much alike. I'd say if you use the purplish brown on this one more intensely, I think you'd get a cooler look. And if you took the brown more intensely on this one, because it is such a matte brown, maybe it would change. But honestly, the brown on this side is cool leaning, even though this one has more like purple. I would also say that if you stuck with this shade here, which has more of a pink to it, and did like this and this, I think you're gonna get, you know, like a cooler, almost purpley pink. Whereas once you bring this shade in and the middle shade, you get more of that like gold, warmish thing. So I think it equals, like it balances out really well, but I don't think it's a drastically different look from last year's. This is my take. The blushes, same thing. I don't think it's a drastically different look because the blushes are cool. This year they're cool, more intense, but you know, still along that pink scale. They're certainly not an orange or brown. And I'd say the powder, the highlighting powder, this is definitely more pink and this definitely has more like of a gold tone, but you're just using it in a very limited way. So I don't think it drastically changes things. However, I'm going to take it, we'll put the lips on in just a minute, but I'm going to take a very large powder brush and I'm going to go in with the illuminating powder on this side of my face. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go very lightly with it. I think it does show up, but I don't think it changes the look drastically, although I do think you get a nice illumination to the face. So I think you can absolutely use it as a face powder, either one of them, as long as you use a fluffy brush. I think if you use a dense brush, you're going to get more of the highlighting look. All right, now for lips, I'm not going to do all 8 shades on my lips today, but I thought what we could do is use the metallic one because I'm pretty sure that one is very different from last year. What I would say is the 2 shades that I think are very different are whatever names these are, and I'll make sure they are down below. This one, because it's metallic, or I'm pretty sure it's metallic, and this one because it's very, very light and very nude or neutral, depending on how you want to, call it. Last year's was definitely all pink, like you saw in my swatches. So last year's lips were definitely pink and red. And this year, yes, these are red, but this one has like a brownish red. This is a true red. This, I think, is Cherie. I think it's the metallic. And then this is very much a nude. So that shade, that last shade, it's not going to show up on our deeper skin tone because it's really light. In fact, I'll put it on my lips first so you can see it. You'll see what I'm talking about. Like, it's a really, really light. It's a really light. I'll use the little brush that came with it because why not? And I'll just put it on my top lip. You can see it's a very, very light shade. It's not even that much deeper than my skin tone, and I'm very pale, obviously. So let's take I'm pretty sure this is the Cherie Metallic. Of course, I've probably been saying this the whole time, and then when I put the information down below, it won't be. It's a very pretty shade. Let's mix it up a little here. Now, I don't usually love lipsticks in a palette. Not because I don't think they can look good, because actually I do think they can look good. My issue always is lipsticks go bad, like I said, before powder products do. So the lipsticks in here will go bad before the rest of it does, and they're all interconnected, like it's all one thing. So you can't take the lipsticks out by themselves. If you could, then I'd be like, okay, there's not a shield on the lipsticks either. So that's another thing. Now I think this whole thing can be removed, but I can't really tell. It looks like it can. Like you could just pop out this whole piece. So I guess you could use this as like clutch, because it is actually really nicely done. It is really pretty. You could just hold it. Or if you're handy, you could figure out how to put, you know, hooks on the sides. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not good with that kind of stuff, but I think it does pop out. It looks like it would. I just don't want to try to do it and then ruin it while I'm still using it. But I do think this is a really beautiful palette. If you have the one from last year, I am not going to come out and say you need this, because honestly, they are very similar. There's two different sides of my face except for the lips, and I don't think you could tell me that they look that different. Do they look different? Yes. Do they look drastically different? No. Especially the eyes. They look very, very similar. So I'd say the differences with this palette is that the highlighter or the illuminating powder is definitely pinker, so it's a cooler shade. The eyeshadow is similar, but it has more intensity. It doesn't really have as much shimmer as the last year's, because last year has that topper, which ends up looking like a satin on the eye, but you can see if I had put it over other things, you'd get more of an intense, shiny look. The lipsticks there's more variety in this palette. You've got the reds, but you've got a brownish red, you've got the metallic, and then you've got that nude shade, which personally, I like having that. And then for the blushes, you have this nice red, whereas last year it was very much a pink. So I think there's more versatility for this year's. I think it's going to work on more skin tones, but I don't think it's drastically different than last year's shades. And like I said, I'll make sure all the information that I do have about which shade, you know, which blush number and all that is up so that you can see the difference. But again, here's last year's, here's this year's. Same size, all that good stuff. I just think it really does depend on whether you have last year's or whether you collect these. They are beautifully done. The velvet, I think, is likely to get dirty. Or if you have makeup on your hands, you're likely to get it on the velvet. I mean, that's me personally. But I do actually like the way it looks. I think it's very, very pretty. And as a clutch, if that's something that you want to do, you could absolutely see this as a clutch, because it's really well done. It's not cheap velvet. The corners are nicely done. Like they did a good job. So my take would be, if you don't have last year's, if you're looking for an all over palette, face palette, this is a really good one. If you want something very warm, you won't like it. If you want something that's, you know, cool, but a little bit neutral, I think this is a really nicely done face palette. And I think that the pigments are deep enough that different people can use it. Formula is the same as the Dior formulas always are. Blushes are very pigmented, they're very good. The highlighters are beautiful, not too shimmery, and there's no glitter in it. Same with the eyes. The shadows are beautiful, they are smooth, they don't settle into lines. I don't see any difference between last year's and this year's. And the lipsticks, I think they feel nice, I think they look good. But again, palette lipsticks I feel like they're not my favorite thing, that's all. But I do like the fact that there are more shades, like different shades in this one. So if I had to pick between this year and last year, I'd pick this year. But I don't think it would be just by a little bit, mostly because of the highlighter being cooler and the fact that there's a nude light lipstick. So that's my take. So thanks so much for joining me today, guys. I really do appreciate it. And I hope to see you in another video really soon. Bye.